few scenes for you to imagine. Imagine somebody tailgating you, and they just keep creeping up on you, and so you start going faster and faster. Your heart starts racing. Or maybe in the other direction. Maybe you see brake lights flash in front of you all of a sudden, and traffic comes to a halt, and you don't know if you can stop soon enough. Or maybe in a different way, that there's like in the gospel, there's a looming debt that you or a family member has, and it's just omnipresent. You just can't stop thinking about it, and it weighs on you. That racing of the heart, that sweating, that stressful feeling, that's what adrenaline does to us. That we feel that stress reaction. It comes up, and we get excited. It prepares us for action. It's a survival mechanism. But what happens when we stay in that way? When we stay jacked up on adrenaline? That stress turns into wear and exhaustion and injury. It's not healthy for us to live in that stressful adrenaline state. In the same way, that horrible feeling is synonymous with unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is one of those worst feelings like that. It's stressful. Praying with the readings, therefore, today, all about forgiveness. The first line that stood out was remember the Most High's covenant and overlook faults. I wasn't sure why this was the line that stood out at first, but the answer quickly came. This line, remember the Most High's covenant and overlook faults. This is the guidance and help from God for how to forgive, how to do that difficult thing that makes us so stressed out. Why would that be the case? Why is this the why we should forgive? What does God's law and commandments and the rest of the covenant have to do with forgiveness? I think that often we know in our mind that forgiveness is something that we're supposed to do. It's like a rule, but we quickly forget or run it over or push it out of the way of our anger and indignation, right? There's something that we have to forgive. There's someone that we have to forgive who has done something that hurts us. And we can see this in a big scale, the difficulty of this, our being prone to lash out instead of forgiveness, instead of following God's guidance. Instead, we lash out. We can see it in a big way in our litigious modern society, where we think more about getting sued, and we're worried about that than about the good we should do. We're more concerned about what we might get in trouble for, or what trouble someone might cause us, than what the right thing to do is. And so, therefore, we see the right thing done so little. We see it also in the constant strangling of informative news into tiny, narrow narratives of outrage. And this is true no matter which side of the aisle you watch, Fox or CNN. They're acting to sell you stories, to keep you watching and listening, not to inform you and help to make the situation better. Not looking for forgiveness, not looking for resolution. Think about it. They have a vested interest in keeping things bad and making them worse, because it's easier to attract and hold people's attention by stabbing at their emotions with bad news than to simply report the conditions and proposals of what to do in the conditions. This is because we're weak. This is because most people don't study easily, and we've been trained besides to accept the worst in our fallen nature and to focus on whatever stirs our emotions and our feelings rather than focus on what is good and what we should do, what's the right thing to do. Most crucially, it's easiest of all to garner support when there's a feeling of desperation. and a common enemy to unite against. It feeds our pride nearly directly. We're right and righteous, and they're the devil. Now, this isn't a homily on media. This is about forgiveness and how hard it is for us to do. We do that on an individual level too. We recast the situation. We look at that person who hurt us as just the worst. There's nothing redeeming about them. There's no middle ground where we can meet and reconcile. We're in the right and they're in the wrong, and they have to apologize to us. And then we'll think about forgiving them. But God's law and commandments remember the Most High's covenant and overlook faults. This doesn't mean the faults didn't happen, but overlooking them. Why should we overlook them? Because we remember the Most High's covenant. What is the Most High's covenant? The Most High's covenant is what Peter was referring to when he said, "How often must I forgive? As many as 7 times?" This is actually more than was commanded in the covenant. And now Jesus expands it to 77 times. Not that we keep a clicker and we count how many times we forgive someone, but the idea that the whole purpose of the covenant is to be reconciled in one with God. And when we are together with God, we're closer to each other. We're reconciled with each other too. We can't have one without the other. What is the Lord like that we're in this covenant with, this union with? The Lord is kind and merciful, slow to anger, and rich in compassion. As often as we are sinned against, we sin against God too. God is kind and merciful with that. He is slow to anger and rich in compassion. So we should not forget all his benefits. He pardons our iniquities. He heals all our ills. He redeems our life from destruction, even self-caused destruction, bad things we choose for ourselves. He crowns us with kindness and compassion instead. He will not always chide, nor does he keep his wrath forever. He doesn't hold on to grudges. He doesn't hold on to that unforgiveness. Not according to our sins does he deal with us, nor does he requite us according to our crimes. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so surpassing is his kindness toward those who fear him. God can forgive anything. And he has established his covenant with us to give us everything we need to do the same and more, to live that perfect life, to live like him, not just in forgiveness, but in every way. God will provide. That's what the covenant is. The covenant is, I will be your God, and you will be my people. I am in charge of providing for you. You don't have to provide for yourselves. You just have to stay faithful. You just have to follow the covenant, and I will be faithful to you. I am perfect. I will always be faithful. Even when you are unfaithful, I will remember the covenant, God says. And because of this, remembering that covenant, remembering God's loving mercy for us, this is why we should overlook faults, because God overlooks ours. Like we hear in the first reading, already in the Old Testament, centuries before Jesus, we hear, "Forgive your neighbor's injustice. Then when you pray, your own sins will be forgiven." This is centuries before, "Forgive us as we forgive those who trespass against us." We will pray in a few minutes. The Lord will provide. He remains faithful. He will give us everything we need. We can trust in him. It'll be okay. We'll be all right if we forgive, if we let this person go, if we let go of that horrible feeling, even if they respond with laughter, even if they mock us, even if they sin again, even if they spite us, we are free. We are freed by forgiveness. We let go of that horrible, stressful, tight, clenching feeling. And God blesses us because in that moment, in forgiving, we are like him.